we're discussing the what do people think in Russia and Belarus about the conflict. And this is very important because actually today we're probably going to be explaining the situation in Belarus for the first time in depth from someone who's from that country, and how Belarus is part of this conflict, and potentially about to become much more part of this conflict. And then we're going to go talk to someone from Russia again, like we did in one of our prior episodes, Tatiana, who will be able to give us some insights on what people inside of Russia are thinking, because she no longer lives there, but obviously has a lot of contacts inside the country. So first thing I want to do is I want to introduce Ignat, who I met in Amsterdam. I was traveling through Amsterdam on the way back to the United States, and I gave a talk on the Borderlands for a group of people in the local area, and I've just given another one now here in my hometown of Lake Charles, Louisiana. So Ignat, I just wanted to welcome you to the show, and just ask you to quickly tell a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, I'm Belarusian. I'm originally from Minsk, Belarus, and I was living there for 30 years of my life. And I had to flee the country after a huge wave of protests, which began after elections in flawed elections in Belarus, where our dictator tyrant again re-elected himself, but this time with a huge. He had really huge problems with it, and it triggered huge wave of protests. Basically, for at least 3 months, there were hundreds of thousands of people on the streets marching, and I was one of them. So for a few months, I was luckily running away from police. It was always extreme danger. A few people died from bullets. Many were wounded. Many had to flee. And but finally, after one of the protests, I was taken by the police, beaten and put to jail for a few weeks. This is like not normal. Those jails are not has no normal circumstances like someone would expect. So you are basically tortured there, and this is designed to be for people to basically have no idea to march again after this type of after this type of treatment in prison. So thousands of people, basically after this wave of protests, 70,000 people went through this, and like most of them tend to flee after this experience. And actually, I would say I would admit that I was one of those people who were considering leaving country, because everything was suggesting that we're not going to win and dark times are coming. And basically, our authoritarian regime is changing into totalitarian, where you can be put to jail for many years because of comment on social media, or because of color of socks and this type of things. So I had it in a way. I was in a good situation. I was studying abroad before in Poland, so I had another kind of home for me, waiting for me, and I left for Poland, where I found my second home.
Got it.
Since this happened in our country, our dictatorship became extremely reliant on Russia. It was dependent, and Lukashenko was considered to be Putin's puppet before, but he was successfully playing different cards, trying to be some kind of partner for European Union sometimes, and because of that, he managed to have certain independence in his in decisions. But since these elections, he lost completely any um, any reliability in the West, any reliability in Europe. Sanctions were introduced, and he was the only regime that was supporting him was Russia, and basically he became overly reliant on Russia since then, and was playing any game Russia was willing to like Russia was asking him to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't understand how critical the Belarusian angle is to this whole Ukrainian invasion, because without the ability to come in from northern front, which the Russian troops basically had this fantasy that they could come in and take over Kiev in the first 2 days from Belarus, because Belarus is 80 kilometers from Kiev when they cross the border. And also, most of the airstrikes and missiles being launched into Ukraine right now are being launched from Belarus. So the fact that in the last conflict, President Lukashenko really was neutral. I mean, as I understand, Ignat, in the last conflict, when it started in 2014, Belarus never endorsed or recognized the annexation of Crimea and really tried to stay out of it. So that was something that really prevented, I think, the conflict before turning into this full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And tell me a little bit about that as you saw things evolve.
Yeah. Actually, Lukashenko has seen himself like privileged in terms of relations with Russia, because he thought he's running proper country, recognized in the world, and all those puppet states which Russia was creating on in other Soviet bloc countries like Pridnestrovia or Transnistria, like Southern Ossetia in Georgia, like Abkhazia. He was never recognizing those like countries, those territories, because he was thinking of himself like a proper ruler, but those are like some artificial objects, and this also allowed him to be seen as an independent player in the West. So he was really trying to defend this status on the West. Like he's not a puppet. He can decide on his own, on something at least. And this was one of the questions where he was still able to not follow Russian or follow Russia way. But also he was sending like, for example, about Donbass, he was never recognizing them because he was saying like Russia is not recognizing them. On Crimea, he was saying he was playing both cards. Actually, he was telling Russian TV stations like, "Oh, it's de facto Russian, and he's willing to trade with it, and willing to Belarusian products were on the shelves in the Crimea and in Donbas regions occupied by Russia. But at the same time, and actually there were situations when you can see cars in Minsk with the plates from those republics or those regions. So technically there was some kind of recognition, but Ministry of International Affairs officially never recognized those republics.
Yeah. So it was really, without the protests that you were a part of and the dramatic repression, which I guess Russian secret police came in and assisted in the repression, right? What was the Russian role in the repression in 2020 in the protests where you were arrested?
Yeah. So it seems like I think this would be known in the future, but from what at least public speakers can see, there were quite many boards from Russia. Like independent investigators were seeing that if FSB was flying, and head of FSB was always many times visited during those protests, Belarus. They were actively talking with Lukashenko's son, who was actually kind of responsible for fighting those protests, and who was head of Security Council back in this time, and simply they were bringing some kind of know-how to how to bring those protests down. Actually, my experience from arrest and from treatment in prison, the closest thing I was reading before was actually, and the closest thing I've seen before was videos from DNR, from those territories occupied in eastern Ukraine, where Ukrainian soldiers were taken, and how they were treated by those rulers and soldiers of those republics, basically Russian soldiers. And basically, protesters were treated the same way as this kind of soldiers of different army, even if those protesters were absolutely peaceful and were arrested like I was in a supermarket.
Yeah.
So Russian role was huge. They were sending at a certain moment, a Belarusian propaganda TV station was not able to continue working and do propaganda, because journalists who were doing this before elections, for many years, were actually unable to do it anymore because of some kind of moral issues with them. And those people were leaving job, and in a certain moment, TV station was not able to continue propaganda, and Russia sent specialists, operators, like camera people to work in Belarusian TV station.
Yeah. So really, they had a very big impact on the success of the repression, which was, unfortunate for people like you and all the people who voted for the candidate that actually won. And more importantly, Russia's support afterwards is the only place that Belarus can go for support. And we're talking about that right now. You had some friends who obviously are still back in Belarus. What is the current situation? What have they faced since you left, and what are they facing right now inside the country? Because there's some news that Belarus railroad operators have sabotaged rail lines and tried to impede movement of supplies to the Russian army in Kiev. There's in northern Ukraine. There's also stories coming out of just the sheer number of dead Russian and wounded Russians who are going through Belarus and being processed, and then medical workers are being threatened with, whatever they're being threatened with to not speak about what they're seeing. So what are you hearing from people inside Belarus about the situation related to the war?
Yeah, because we have extremely different situation than in Russia. Since those protests, Lukashenko and his government never managed to get any support of Belarusians. So basically, he's relying on people with guns, and this is like something like 10% of the people. Maybe he's called Alexander 3% because of his support of 3% of people. And since
he's got the right 3%, the 3% with guns, right?
yeah. And because of this, since our protests, we had other institutions we were not only protesting, but we were trying to somehow to influence regime and to follow it. So there were institutions that were working on this. There was organized so-called plan victory, plan Перемога, which aimed to collect people and organize them who work in different organizations, like critical, like for example railways, like military, who supports the fall of regime. So former policemen and military people organized those structures in abroad, of course, in exile, mostly in Poland. And since this time, this plan was waiting for implementation, for a moment when the regime was weak, to start some sabotage and protests and finally break it. So those organizations and this infrastructure, it was activated after war has begun, and those former policemen and military from exile activating those connections, and those people who work in those critical infrastructure points, and those people are breaking actually those railway systems physically or hug them. And because of that, many problems. Russian army experienced a huge number of problems in Belarus, logistic, of course, and actually, regime had to organize policing of railways by elite forces all the way across Belarus. A few places, like a few critical logistically places where some sabotaging was organized, are living basically in like we were living before in police state, but people were arrested in a small town of Stolpci 300 people, like a town of maybe less than 10,000 of people, 300 people were arrested because some sabotaging was happening around. Those people mostly with some kind of background of disloyalty to government. Of course, they are not only arrested, but tortured, put into prison. Not, of course, their devices, their laptops are taken, and they, of course, they are looking for some information about contacts with those abroad in exile who are trying to organize this sabotaging. And this is happening all over Belarus those days. Just a few hours ago, there was a news about. I'm not sure if it is like nothing can be sure those days, but there was news that something has happened in Mosul in Belarus, and quite many Russian soldiers died in effect of that. But this need to be checked.
When was this? Today?
Just a few hours, yes, today.
Okay. And there was they said a bunch of Russian soldiers died in Belarus. What happened?
Yeah. Some kind of fire. I mean,
okay.
Like something has broken, and there was a fire, and a few Russians died. But this was.
You think that was sabotage then?
Yes, this was sabotage, and this was officially announced as a sabotage.
Got it.
Like.
Okay. So the activation of this group, I guess you'd call it the resistance in Belarus against the regime, happened when the war started or before the war started, and it seems to be intensifying the conflict between the resistance in Belarus and the regime, right?
Yeah, such kind of things were going on before, but of course this was not this was not connected with particular infrastructure that connecting Belarus and Ukraine.
Got it. Okay. And last thing, Ignat, before we move on, is we were talking about the potential invasion of Ukraine from Belarusian forces, where the diplomat from Belarus to the ambassador from Belarus to Ukraine and last 11 people of your country's embassy have moved back to back to Belarus. So now the evacuation of an embassy, which Russia did right before the invasion, is a bad sign. And also troops now are being moved to the border to rotate. Explain to me the potential for an invasion from Belarus and what you think, what you're seeing and what you're hearing about that, because it could be any day now or any hour now.
Actually, I was pessimist on this from the beginning. I was sure that they would be already there, and actually the way like a few times there were news about this in Ukraine, and I was meeting them with, of course, with great regret, but I was expecting this to happen. Like I'm a person from big city, from Minsk, and most of the people who are going to the military are tend to be from smaller towns and villages. So and like it's hard for me to say what is in their mind and how they see the situation. I know that they tend to be isolated. And Belarus at the moment is a really isolated place because you cannot, most websites, most independent and controlled sources are blocked. So you really have to look for information. You really have to search for information, and you can be, even for reading, you can be jailed for some years. So you can imagine how hard is to get information, to spread it in these circumstances. So yeah, there are signs that some of the soldiers are not happy with the situation. Actually, most soldiers in Belarus were thinking of their work as something they would have actual fight will never happen. So they were never expecting this situation to come. So I think that maybe not the kind of political views can affect this, but rather the complete unpreparedness, mental unpreparedness for this. I would say that another terrible sign is the state of propaganda in Belarus. I wouldn't say that this propaganda influence has a huge influence on people, but the message it sends to the people, showing that Belarus is on a way to enter Ukraine and enter the war, level of hatred towards Ukrainians and level of lies about what's going on there is absolutely dramatic, and sometimes even probably they go even further than in Russia.
Yeah. So you think it's imminent, and the soldiers may or may not be happy. There's rumors that the generals, the chief of staff from Belarus resigned over this. I'm not sure if that's true, but the officers potentially may need to be replaced by Russian officers. There's also a rumor that I heard, and the soldiers may not be that happy going in. What are you hearing on those fronts?
Yeah, there is information about that, but I think that in a way this is kind of this is overly too optimistic to think that those people who were studying in Russian universities, like military academies, will not be like will not be interested, or will somehow found it easier to not to not go in not fulfill the orders of the powerful. I think that Belarusian government basically is absolutely even I think elites in Belarus, I mean Lukashenko's elite, are completely aware that Lukashenko is just another avatar, and his words are not worth anything, and they know the real lord, and this lord is Putin, and they tend to serve him with that.
Unrest that may happen, which sadly for the soldiers of Belarus will be intensified if they start going in and incurring casualties, which we know is a disability.
Yeah, this is absolute tragedy. And I hope this still has hopes that this will not happen, but evidence suggests otherwise.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna move the conversation over to Tatiana. Tatiana, you've been here listening to this, and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from in Russia. When did you leave? Where are you right now?
I left a long time ago, part of any plan. I was just young, and I happened to have a chance to come to US, which I never planned to become my home country. Um, and I just said, then of course, once I had children, it was clear for me that Russia is not the country where you can see your kids growing. It's not like US is a perfect country with no problems, but you know, just having a KGB as your president in quotes is not an option for no country in the world, and should never be. Um, for nobody. Those internal services, they not mean to rule the countries. They not mean to even see the country future. All they see is plots against them and trying to find out. And they pretty much, I think that Putin always seen his people, Russian people, as his enemies, or any one of them to become his personal enemy. And that's why he always finds them. And that's why this is not a country that I would choose for my children to live, no matter how much I personally myself is attached to my homeland that I still love. I love my people. I love my culture, my language. We speak home. Just all my children were born in U.S. and their first language is Russian. That's I cannot tell you more than that. Of course, they all speak perfect English. Their Russian is at different level at this point of time, but this is their first language, and this is the most important thing in my life. And my best friends, my relationship, families, extended families, everybody's in Russia, mostly in Moscow. So these are people that I talk often, I talk close, we all connected. These are people that most important for me in my life, and I want to see them. And my personal tragedy right now, which is of course nothing to what people experience who are in Ukraine or coming from Ukraine, or Belarusian people who facing the feast right in their faces, between blocked between the choice of being tortured to death in jail. That's how I feel it. And being killed in Ukrainian fields, even if it's against their feelings and understanding, and understanding that it's a war crime. But my personal tragedy, that I will never see my people again. I won't be probably even be able to help them. Probably, hopefully, some of them can flee. None that I personally know in Russia supports any of that ridiculous, crazy legend of Putin that is pushing on TV. And to me, it's a very, very long stretch how anyone can believe it, even though theoretically I understand the power of propaganda. But there are other sources. There are a lot of information. Like I said, everybody that I talk in Moscow, they all know how to get information. I was never able to give them any part of information that I get in US from Russian sources, by the way. I was never being able to surprise them with anything. Not that I tried. We all talk on the same page. We know what's going on, and I know some of people that I know. They go to protest. They do risk their life, their health, their freedom, anything. And it's not up to me to encourage them to do it or discourage them to do it, because it's a very scary, very scary experience to leave your family, especially for single mothers, to leave their children alone, knowing what could happen to them. And I mean, I'm in a safety. I can't tell them what to do unless I join the fight. And I understand that a lot of Russians, older generations of my parents, which would be around 80s, I understand why they could be traded into the propaganda. Of course, people with age, they become weaker in many ways. And they weaker navigating internet, they weaker of being more resourceful in terms of let's check this and that and another 5 sources and see what's really is going on. They also, I don't think they can actually, we were born, we lived, we were raised with the idea that we are a country that the most important thing for us is never war, never something like World War II, never fascism. The calling someone fascist was the worst word that I could come up with. And it just does not sit together in their mind. It blows up their torches, their brain, to say that my people are fascist. That means I'm fascist. It's just an impossibility to stretch your brain that far. So they know our people are good. But I'm talking right now about their older generation. And like I say, I give them excuse for their weakness that comes with age, for some earlier, for some not. But for anyone more capable, more resourceful in a normal way, like I was telling, I'm not a computer savvy, and I have Russian news. That's what I read. That's what I watch, and I know everything. That's what's going on. There are sources in Russia for people to know the truth. Echo Moskvy invites every journalist. They Gordon is a very prominent. I'm sure Ignat knows the name, right? Very prominent Ukrainian journalist, very interesting personality, always worth listening. Novaya Gazeta is another source that known to know to give people a lot of truthful information. So I don't understand. I don't believe those numbers, but I do see people who believe in this. I don't even know how to say that. It's just as good as to believe that we fight in Martians in Ukraine. Just as fantastic. And they are the ones to be blamed who are not wanting to know.
So Tatiana, what are your family members or friends specifically in Russia? Do you have any stories of conversations you've had or anything like how is it going speaking to people, or is it just hard to speak to people inside the country?
No, I don't. So far, we don't have problems with communications. I can speak. I can use in applications that belong not to Russian companies. I know they encrypted and coded, so as long as they can delete their messages from phone. But we only started, being a little bit careful since the beginning of the war. Before we could freely talk, we could do.
So what are your, out of your relatives and friends, what do they think? What do most people think? Are they supportive? Or are they not? Do you believe the statistics that 70% of Russians are supportive of this war? What do you think is the reality versus what's being portrayed in the media about how Russians feel? Can you hear me? Sorry. Ignat, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ignat, do you have friends in Russia also, or are most of your friends in Belarus?
Yeah, I have some friends in Russia, actually, those whom I met in Belarus, and those who participate in recent protests. They are extremely shocked by this situation, and they were critical of regime before all of that. So those are actually they feel extremely isolated in Russian society, and this is people, I would say, like them are quite a minority in the Russian society, even in Moscow. That doesn't mean that this support for this war is that strong, as you mentioned, 70%. I wouldn't believe any figures gathered in dictatorship, because you need to understand that how even some independent research, how independent research of opinion looks like. You are getting called in the middle of the day and asked whether you like Putin or whether you like war, and you know that this for answering wrong question, for answering in the wrong way, you may be jailed. So people from Soviet times are really cautious answering such kind of answering such kind of questions, and they treat this as some kind of conspiracy against them, and answering what they feel, like what propaganda suggests most of the time. But
I may also add.
I was just asking.
Also,
I was asking before you left. Do you believe the statistics that 70% of Russians are supportive of this conflict, or what do you feel like is the real truth based on all of your friends and family back in Russia?
I don't believe 70%. Definitely not. I do understand that there is a lot of support comes from brainwashing. That really, I think, another crime against humanity that people did, just killing the brain for such a large amount of people and enslaving them through inside out. But I don't believe in 70%. But I do believe that people are not truthful to any kind of questioning, because how do I know how do I know if who is questioning me? How do I know if you pretend to be one thing while you're another? How do I know my children won't be taken hostage? It because Russia done it. It takes hostages. Just to give you an example that everybody would know, Navalny's brother was taken to jail and spent years there for being his brother, for nothing else, just being a brother. We all know that. You can put your older parents at risk, no matter how innocent, supportive they are. Who wants that? So people, I don't believe in any kind of surveys, polls, because people must be smart and must be careful. Yes, I know brave people who come on the street and they protest and they come to be arrested. They come back to protest again. I have secondhand accounts of people who were tortured, including females. They were being tortured badly in the most recent protest for not even calling against war. We're not allowed to say word war in Russia right now. We don't have a war, according to regime and Putin, but just calling for peace.
Yeah.
And that's unbelievable, because I don't know any country, and I never remember myself ever hearing that calling for peace could be considered as any kind of a crime. that is going way too far upside down. And we did see information about even children being jailed for coming with the peace posters.
Yeah. Yeah, now that there's been some pretty dramatic scenes about families with small children being put in jail in Russia.
Yes.
So Tatiana, with your family, what is the overwhelming sentiment? Tell me some stories of what's going on inside Russia right now related to society, the economy, their feelings about the war.
Well, the feelings in my family that they have to face the worst stages of economy that we've never experienced in our life. We all know how to be lived in Soviet Union, but we're not old enough to live as far back as maybe 55. 1955, because if the economic pressure at the level as I can imagine, that pretty much makes economy to be self-sufficient, which in my lifetime never happened. We at least relied on friendly Soviet bloc of other countries. We were never, Soviet Union wasn't alone supporting itself. So we have to go back to maybe 1955. That's what I think in economy. It's a horrible prospect. It's basically same type of war casualties. People will die because of that. People won't have access to medications, to treatment, to food. Those people that are already poor, they're going to be below level. Right now, some supporters of Putin, they celebrating that there will be no rich, which is, of course, I understand their bitterness, but there will be always people who will just take the last piece of meal from someone else's mouth, and there will be a lot of crime. There will be horrible situation for a lot of people, and most people who are the most suffering will be on the middle class, which is mostly against the war, but they will pay the highest price, which is extremely unfair. But the war is never fair, and right now, who is mostly unfair is the bombing, is the children who are in fear, who cannot sleep, who scream at night, and of course, dead people. In now we're counting so many thousands of civilian Mariupol that is pretty much gone. All those things are. That's what is not fair right now. But there will be horrible situation. It's just coming later in Russia, and that's very painful too.
So Tatiana, how is it for you being a Russian in America right now? Are you feeling any change in the way people treat you, either friends or people who just meet you for the first time and understand that you're from Russia?
I feel a lot of support,
Really?
which comes as a surprise, maybe because I feel responsible and guilty too. I never participated in, trying to protest, being nicely and safe in U.S. So I don't feel that I deserve this support. I feel a lot of understanding. As long as I'm sharing this position that I try to explain you, they understand that right now it's the battle between evil and ultimate evil, like Voldemort type of evil that has nothing good whatsoever. It's the war of one person. One person wants a war. One person leads the war. One person destroys everything he can reach, his own people, his own country, to destroy another country, as much people as he can. And there's no benefits in it. There's no benefits for nobody except for one person will to go as far as he can. And that is unbelievable how world allowed this. While I feel guilty and I think Russian people are guilty, I think the whole world is guilty.
Yeah.
And maybe Russian people and especially Belarusian people are less guilty because while my people were suppressed, while Belarus was suppressed, nobody forced this friendliness, extended relationship with president. I put it in quote mark president because we all know that originally he was supposed to be no longer than 8 years. He's 22 there. Who doesn't know how to count until 8?
Yeah.
In US, in Europe, in Britain, they all know. But we want gas, we want comfortable prices on oil. So we agreed to close eyes and come to soccer championship. We swallow Krim. We let Navalny to sit for everybody. We have good prices. We're comfortable.
Yeah.
We're paying for this now.
It's certainly the American government and the European governments have certainly got a lot to answer for in terms of, you know, letting Russia get to this point where Putin felt he could get away with it. And
he could get away with it. And he did get away with Crimea.
Yep.
He did get away with MH17 for how many? For 8 years? That was not even Russian. That was not internal matter that Russians were supposed to deal with. It was a European flight with a lot of Europeans that for his playing the military game on the territory of Ukraine.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's true. And I think the Western governments and American that do blame Russians only and Belarusians only should remember that we all have responsibility for this.
Yeah. And I think we should remember how Lukashenko personally ordered an airplane just recently, what is it, a couple months ago, with military planes to grab a journalist that was tortured literally on a world TV.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we just all swallowed that. We just didn't say what was said exactly. I could not even touch the world response to this.
Yeah.
It was enough to try and put them into more responsible situation, and the responsibility was forgotten. Yeah. What about Putin using Novichok and Polony on the territories of the other countries?
Yep.
That was a great excuse for anyone to start the case against him. It's a prohibited weapon. It's used on other countries internationally. I mean, you can't rely on just Russian people. What are we supposed to do?
Yeah. No, it's one of those things where pay me now or pay me later, and we've accrued a lot of debt and interest on this problem that, looking back, there could have been multiple points at which
there was a lot of ways to start and to confront. A lot of events could be a good start for that. A lot of events. Putin gave a lot of events.
Yeah. So Ignat, I'm going to throw this question over to you also. How do you feel? How are you treated in Warsaw and wherever you travel as someone from Belarus?
I never hide it and never met personally any disrespect for this. I don't think I deserve it, but I see that like Belarus was one of the countries rather unknown for many, and I see that like, eyes of my of people, new people I met. I catch that they know it from news, from recent news. They are aware about probably stories of protests previously, and they are aware about situation in Ukraine and Belarusian involvement in this. I would say presume involvement in this. But I never seen it personally. But there are some situations, for example, in Warsaw, where some cars have been broken with Belarusian plates, and this type of stuff is happening. But overall, this is a minority.
Yeah. Well, look, for both of you, I just really wanted to thank you for coming on and sharing your perspective. And as I normally do, I want to share the news. We'd like to highlight what's the most interesting things that are coming out on Twitter. And if either one of you would like to make any comments while I do this, I'm happy to do that. So I'm going to bring that up onto the screen now and just talk through what's the news over the last few days. I think over the last 4 or 5 days.
Your professional life has
so first things first, this is a video from President Zelensky, an interview that he gave with CNN. Hold on just one second. So just getting started here. So first things first, President Zelensky was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. This was a late entry, but probably well deserved. And I think probably he's going to be hard to beat in that front. And this is a video of President Zelensky with CNN talking about the personal toll that war is playing on him as a president.
Professional life has prepared you for this extraordinary
Sorry about my connection here. I don't know why it's not great here for these videos.
deal you're going through. How are you handling it just personally?
Well, I'm doing just everything that everyone else in Ukraine is doing. We have made up our team to defend our country. So it seems to me that the person does not need to turn into anyone else. That's important when you can be just yourself. And when you have this real feeling, when you have this real, very sincere attitude to your people, in spite of, regardless of whether you are present or not. It's supremely important. That you like your people, your country, your neighbors. And in peaceful times where you feel the pleasure from work, and from results that you get from your work, it seems to me that this is the most important thing. So I'm holding up quite well. As of now, my weakest point is losing people, losing children in these huge numbers, and this huge amount of casualties. I go to sleep with this information about children who were killed, and we continue to pray in order to prevent new losses. people. But so far we haven't attained this result, so this is the most important moment of it.
So residents of occupied Kherson are also very unhappy. This is the largest city that's actually been successfully occupied by Russian troops, and this is how they are reacting to the local occupation. Literally pushing a truck back. No. A truck going backwards with nothing in front of it but people. Pretty amazing. The continued bravery of ordinary people in Ukraine. Ukrainian counterattack in Kherson was actually apparently there was a counterattack staged right outside of Kherson, where they destroyed the command post at an airfield, and they're apparently advancing all the way back towards Kherson. So there's a big counteroffensive happening right now between Mykolaiv, with that famous governor, and the town of Kherson. So that was the same town that you just saw here with the protests. And if Ukraine does get to this point, that's a huge. This one crossing point is supplying all the forces on this side of the Dnipro River. So that's a big deal if that actually does happen. Right. There's also this is another protest that happened inside Berdyansk, where the Russian troops are being quite brutal towards the local population. This is what we talked about today. Belarusian railway workers sabotaged the railway lines leading to Ukraine, making it impossible for Russians to resupply by train. Russian logistics situation near Kyiv just went from bad to worse. And we talked about this today. The highest ranking officer of the war, Lieutenant General Andrei Mordvichev, has been killed in the battle around Kherson. And it's the 6th Russian general, including 4 other Russians and 1 Chechen general, that have been killed in this war. And that's a big blow for the Russian military. And let's see. Waiting on the next. So Ignat, we talked about the railroad here. Now this is about Ukrainian General Staff sees high risk of attack from Belarus on Western Ukraine. They said in the next several days, Belarus will join the invasion, which this could mean an attack all the way in the west side of Ukraine to try and seal the supply routes from Poland that's coming through, bringing all these weapons. So this would be a very big strategic move. And Ignat, I think you said that Russia offered economic bargain to Belarus to get them into the war. So I think you're muted, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Belarus for many years has had quite an efficient economy, and heavily relied on Russia, both economically and sometimes with credits. So Belarus owes, the regime owes quite a lot of money to Russia, and at the moment, situation even before war was quite terrible for regime, and they had to give back those money to Russia. And Russia is using this situation, and it offered 5-year extent for payments, and it seems like this may be the payment for participation in this campaign.
Yeah. And this is another piece of news that Ukraine's putting out, which is there's potentially a power struggle inside Russia where the elites have a scheme to overthrow Putin to restore economic ties with Western countries. And Alexander Bortnikov, the head of the FSB security agency, is allegedly being considered as Putin's successor, according to Ukraine's intelligence. This is definitely something to watch as the pressure mounts on the Russian regime, because there's a lot of people, as Tatiana said in the show, who probably aren't very happy about this. And the big mass rally the other day that you saw on television, where Putin had his own Trump-like rally, or big stadium full of people where he was talking, it seemed like a lot of the people there were paid to be there, were government workers who were forced to be there, who left right after the rally started. A lot of people left. And many of them who were being interviewed said they weren't happy about what was happening in Ukraine. So it's hard to tell the official propaganda versus how people are actually feeling. But this is interesting, a piece of intelligence here.
I would also raise that it's often not that important how they feel, but what they're doing with this. And actually, propaganda is working not to make people believe something, but to believe that they are not able to change a situation and to somehow influence it.
Yeah. And speaking of that, 93% of Ukrainians believe in victory over Russia, and 47% believe Ukraine can win the war in the next few weeks. And this is actually up from, I think, 80% or 90% last week. The number keeps rising. And this also shows that Ukraine probably will not accept anything other than a full deoccupation of Ukraine, which is really the only acceptable outcome for a lot of Ukrainians, the way they feel at this point, which sets up a huge clash between Russia, what they need to sell to their population as a successful conclusion to the war, versus what Ukrainians need. And that bodes well. There's some hope, Ignat, for Belarus in that equation. This is a good commentary from Shashank Joshi, who's talking about U.S. not having a great response. And he makes the point that this package for Ukraine is larger than what Truman sent to Greece and Turkey, and sanctions are the broadest and heaviest ever imposed on a big economy. And you heard the impact that that's having on Russia today. And there's 10 million people in this conflict in Ukraine who've been displaced. 6.5 are what you call internally displaced people, and 3.2 million from Ukraine have become refugees. And this is really never been this many refugees in such a short period of time. And so-called Kadyrovites, mercenaries of the Chechen leader Razman Kadyrov, who fought in Ukraine, have reportedly returned home due to heavy losses. This is a early report. I've seen a lot of videos of Chechens in the battle for Mariupol, They're still putting out a lot of videos about themselves, but this is an interesting, what we'll call it rumor for now, or early piece of reporting. And really interesting thing about celebrities in Ukraine, Pasha Lee, a famous actor and voiceover artist from Crimea, was killed early in the conflict. Another actress, very famous actress in Ukraine, was killed in the crossfire by a rocket. And then recently, a ballet dancer, famous Ukrainian ballet dancer who signed up to fight in the Territorial Defense Unit, was killed. And Timothy Snyder, famous author about Ukraine, makes the point: Ukrainian celebrities are dying at the front. American celebrities, please use your platforms to make it clear that Russian attacks on civilians are criminal. And Gary Kasparov makes a comment: last I saw, dozens of Hollywood stars used the opportunity to write a letter protesting a pipeline instead. The safety of meaningless actions. And, you know, the boxing stars, the sports stars in Ukraine, they're all fighting. It's pretty amazing. Another interesting piece of intelligence, this is based on Ukrainian government reports, armed forces reports. There is a significant amount of counterattack fighting happening in the region north of Kyiv, heading up towards Belarus. And there is a very strong possibility I see here that Ukrainian forces could continue to have success and start to cut off. The goal looks like here to cut off Russian forces from their supply lines, which would be a significant blow to all the forces north of here. 3 Russian cosmonauts arrived at the International Space Station last night in flight suits made in yellow and blue of the Ukrainian flag, in what appeared to be a daring statement against the war. Of course, the Kremlin denied this, but they certainly couldn't be very happy about the choice of uniforms from their cosmonauts, whether or not they are admitting that it's a form of official or unofficial protest. And a 98-year-old war veteran from Ukraine tried to sign up for the war again to defend her country. She was told, because of her age, that she wasn't allowed to fight, but she was told to expect another victory for Ukraine soon. And this is again the electricity of the spirit in Ukraine is hard to overstate. This shows a CCTV footage from a home of a Ukrainian couple. Russian troops enter their yard, point guns at them, demand they lie down, hand over the woman's phone. The couple walks right up to the soldiers, forces them out. A woman says she'll give her phone over a dead body. So some really amazing stories of resistance by regular people in inside of Ukraine.
Опять двор, ворота закрыл. Вижу по камерах, что врываются, во двор русские. 3 человека вроде. Да, 3 человека. 4-й стоял на улице. Там же с женой вышли и начали их встречать. Ну что, они кричали сперва, мужчина выходит с поднятыми руками. Мы оттуда с дома с женой вышли и, сказали лежать. Ну, нельзя так сказать, как мы их послали, наверное. Русскими матами встречали. Ну, сперва думали, что нас напугают, лежать, потом руки вверх. Мы в 5 их послали по-русскому. Потом воздух начали стрелять, тут, чтобы нас типа напугать. Потом на жену наставили автомат, что типа, чтобы телефоны отдать. Жена сказала через мой труп только. Ну, потом немножко успокоились, один адекватный был, 2 придурка были. Потом мы потихоньку их выгнали с нашего двора и все. Пошли вниз по улице обратно.
And Ukrainian government Ministry of Defense was mocking Putin, who said everything's going according to plan. They said Russian armed forces and economy are being destroyed in strict accordance with Kremlin's plan. So Ignat, I think you should be happy that everything's going according to plan for Putin and maybe Belarus also.
I would expect it going smoother. I mean, this plan was destroying, but hopefully it will succeed.
So this is something I call RUMINT. We used to call in the Army human intelligence, and I've seen it was HUMINT for short, HUMINT. And this is what I call RUMINT when you see some things on Twitter. But it's an interesting story. And whether or not this is true, the fact that it's out there is impactful. A crazy war story. Apparently 8 soldiers died after a Ukrainian babushka treated them with some pastries. They turned out to be intentionally poisonous. If this is true, that's pretty amazing, and let's call it ironic, given the Russian government's history with poisoning dissidents like Navalny and other people. But even if it's not true, the fact that this story's out there is significant, because Russian soldiers across Ukraine are notorious on across many sources for begging for food because of Russian logistics. Convoys are getting targeted, and Russian soldiers are just hungry. They're out of food, and they're going anywhere they can for it. So if this didn't happen, which I hope it did, and I hope we hear confirmation of it, it's going to certainly give Russian soldiers pause going around the country looking for food. And this is we'll end on a final video.
A simple word, merely a part of speech used in everyday life. But it's not that simple for us, because now the everyday Ukrainians simply cannot say words without bursting into tears. This was my home. This was my friend. This was my dog. This was my car. This was my job, and this was my father, and this was my daughter. The millions and millions of Russian wounds are bleeding with that wounds. Russia has drowned Ukraine in tears and blood and children corpses. But there is one thing Russia doesn't get. Was is the word that describes its life, and we Ukrainians already know what will come next. We will win, and there will be new houses, there will be new cities, there will be new dreams, there will be a new story, there will be there's no doubt, and those we've lost will be remembered. And we will sing again, and we will celebrate anew. Yes, Ukraine was beautiful, but now it will become great, great Ukraine.
So that's a really powerful, I must say, President Zelensky's background in show business has been an amazing asset for this conflict, and he's a masterful storyteller in English. That video was narrated by President Zelensky, and really powerful imagery and storytelling. And in fact, his video that he showed at the United States Congress had a huge impact on the government of the United States, and I think they're even more urgent support for the Ukrainian cause has been impacted by his ability to tell stories. And maybe he'll give an address to the Belarusian free people one of these days, in hopefully in person before it's too long.
Actually, he was addressing already, I think, a few weeks ago when there was first the first sign that this is possible. And actually, probably one of those addresses triggered this resistance we see now. I mean, on the railways.
Yeah.
I want to just to say that many consider it, even in Ukraine, many consider it as President Zelensky as pro-Russian president, pro-Russian candidate during elections. He was considered to be softer president, the one who will negotiate with Putin, the one who will probably give away some Crimea or Donbass, occupied parts of Donbass. And some part of Ukrainian society was even not expecting him to behave the way he is. So sometimes moral views and moral background of the person can disclose him more than some public messaging he was placing during campaign.
Yeah. No, it's been quite an amazing metamorphosis, transformation, or let's call it discovery of a leader that no one was expecting. I think most Ukrainians before the war didn't fancy Zelensky as the right wartime leader, and he's certainly risen to the occasion. And I think that you could say a lot of things about President Zelensky for a long time, but the most important thing was character, and that shines through in a moment of crisis, and his character, I think, has revealed itself and been quite strong. He's willing to, for all the people who want to criticize him for anything, they certainly can't say that he's not subjected himself to the hardships of his people and the same danger, and probably more danger than anyone else, given his position. And that's really rallied the nation and really the world. Most people around the world, I think, have been inspired by what he's done, and hopefully will continue to do, and onward to the victory that 93% of Ukrainians expect, and 47% of them expect it very soon. So, Ignat, I really appreciate your courage too in standing up in your own country for what you think is right, and many people in Belarus that are still there who are doing the same thing, and this resistance movement that you speak of, that I think gives me a lot of hope for your country. And and I think most people in your country know that Ukraine's future will determine your future, and it's really important for Belarus to see Ukraine prevail, and that should lead to hopefully brighter future for your own country, and hopefully make it safe for you and others to go back.
Yeah, I think that we have to fight together with Ukrainians, and many Belarusians actually do with arms, doing this with arms, and people like Belarusians probably abroad support Ukrainians the most, and I hope this tradition will help Belarus at least not get involved as strong as it can in this war on the Russian side, and hopefully with the win of Ukraine and with destruction of Russia, Russian regime at least, our regime will fall immediately. This is people who serve for this regime are serving, actually. They are aware. They serve to Putin and his cronies, and they were aware that, and they believe this is this regime cannot fall, cannot change, and with this in mind, they're doing their bloody job.
Yeah. Well, here's to a brighter future for Ukraine and Belarus. And I know how historically you both countries are linked, and hopefully a brighter future for Ukraine means the same for your country. And again, all the best to you and your fellow countrymen in and outside of Belarus who are fighting for that better future.
Thanks for your job too, and for your storytelling.
Thank you, Ignat. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And thanks everyone for joining another episode. We'll be back every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Right now is our current schedule of broadcasting. And if you have any recommendations on guests along the lines of people you've seen on the show before, or you'd like to support Ukrainians in their time of need, you can donate to the Borderlands Foundation, the nonprofit we've established to support Ukrainians affected by the conflict inside and outside the country. We have full-time refugee support operations helping refugees, and really would like to get your support if you feel like supporting it. So thanks again for joining another episode, and we'll see you next time.